Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join today's webinar here with CADTALK and Guide Technologies on the journey climbing the CAD to Infor CSI integration mountain. We're going to walk through things here in just a few minutes. I'm going to give everyone maybe another 2 minutes to come online, make sure that we get things going. This is being recorded, so if you are, have to duck off at some point during that, we will be sending out the recording afterwards. I realize everyone's busy with different things to do, so I understand if you need to jump off, we'd be happy and we'll send you that recording when everything wraps up. Couple of housekeeping things I just want to note as folks are coming in. We will have time for questions at the end of the webinar today. We're going to leave some time for that. So if the chat or the question function within the webinar, you're more than welcome to go ahead and pop those questions in. You also will have a couple of polls that will come up during the webinar, so keep your eye out for those. I'll be sure to prompt you when those are coming in, and you can answer those, and we can be able to guide the webinar as things go along based on your answers. I'm seeing some more folks jumping in, so we'll go about another 30 seconds, and then we will get started with today's presentation. Thank you so much for signing up, for joining us. I really do appreciate it. All right, we are coming up at 2 past the hour, and that's going to be enough time for us to go ahead and get started. Thanks again for joining us here. CADTALK and Guide Technologies presenting the journey, climbing the CAD to Infor CSI integration mountain. So who have we got on today? I'm John Thomas, the marketing manager here at CADTALK Software. I will let my colleague Dylan Olson introduce himself.
Yeah, thanks, John. I'm Dylan Olson, solutions architect here at CADTALK. Worked here for a number of years. Worked as a manufacturing engineer for a little over a decade before coming here, and gained extensive ERP experience that got a little more intimate with ERPs than I anticipated, and kind of built my own integration with Autodesk Vault and Epicor. And that's kind of how I stumbled in the doors here to solve those problems for others now.
Very excited to have Dylan being able to join us. He has seen all sides of the integration equation, and I think will be a really good resource for those of you who are joining the call today. I'll be guiding the conversation as we go along. We'll also be drawing on insights from Guide Technologies. I know there are a few folks who will be tuning in to listen from Guide, so if there are any Guide-specific questions that come up in the call, we have follow-up information for Guide, and those folks will be available to be a resource for you all as well. So very excited to have them as partners for today's webinar, and grateful for their partnership as well. All right, why are we here today? What are we going to learn? So there are 3 points that we find as we look through and have implemented hundreds of different CAD to ERP integrations, not just Cloud Suite Industrial, but across the spectrum. There is this universal challenge that every manufacturing team we talk to has trouble getting design data into their ERP system without a bunch of manual re-entry. There may be some internal processes that are designed to be able to alleviate that, but ultimately it still falls on some sort of manual process to re-enter that data into whatever ERP that is. This is not picking on Cloud Suite Industrial. This is across the board. This is a universal issue. Today, we're going to share a framework for thinking about that integration. So it's not a project with an end date. That is the view that I think 90% of people we see come into the CAD to ERP integration space have, is looking to say, how can we have an end date to this? How can we finish this? It sounds like a cheesy line on a coffee cup, but integration is a journey, not a destination. So by the end of the webinar, you'll know exactly where you are on this journey, and then what your next steps would be for your manufacturing business, and how you can implement that within Infor Cloud Suite Industrial, and how we can kind of see where you are and assess where you are. And we have a framework for that that we'll walk through called Integration Mountain. We'll talk about that here in just a little bit. But the disconnected reality in Infor Cloud Suite Industrial and in other ERP implementations is that engineering has great data in their CAD, whether that could be a PDM, a PLM as well, but that data is trapped. Manual handoffs create bottlenecks at every stage. Guide Technologies would say data can be your greatest asset or your greatest liability. Disconnected data is at the root of poor decisions. Here are the numbers behind some of that. So Guide did some research about this specifically. There's a blog on their website you can go through and take a look that was published last year. 44%, almost half of manufacturers have doubled their data collection since 2022. Everyone's understanding the importance of good data, of being able to collect data. Problem is, 70% of manufacturers still enter that data manually. So there's more data and more issues about being able to get that data over. From our own research that we've done at CADTALK, about 33% of engineering time is spent on what we call non-value added work. So that's work that's not based on engineering. That's work that's not designing. That's work that is not really what engineers are paid to and trained to do. It's expensive data entry clerks. And nearly 30% of the time, they're working with outdated information. So all of that translates into rising costs as well. That's a huge concern, as you see here on the screen, of manufacturing CEOs, is trying to alleviate those rising costs. And when you are spending a lot of time and energy on manual data entry, that translates into time being money and money lost. So that's the issue. What does this look like, though, specifically in Infor? And I'll turn this over to Dylan now to be able to speak to this a little bit more directly. Infor is a great solution. We have a long history of working with Infor. We've been integrating with the solution for over a decade now. But not every ERP, Infor included, is going to do everything. So walk us through what that looks like. What are the typical issues that a manufacturer will run across in their ERP when you're looking at trying to figure out this data entry?
Yeah, so starting from the beginning with the engineering release process, and we'll just touch point on like new product development where we have a initial release for production where we have to go through the item creation inside of CSI and create all of the items that are required for this new product that we're going to make. So if it's a structure bill of material, we can have 5 to 1,000 or more items that need to be created that they all could be new to CSI. So having to go through and create every single one of those manually, or if you have some kind of import workflow templates where you have some generic spreadsheets that have some of the initial parameters that you need to set on all of those items, you can go through and do it that way, but you still have to go through and make sure that all of those items are fully defined and ready for manufacturing or procurement to be able to utilize all that information. But once you have all those items created, now you have to go and create all of the bill of materials. So if it's a flat BOM or a multi-level structure, going through creating all of those BOMs, whether that's a manual entry or again with like an import scenario with spreadsheets. But you always run into those errors where if you're doing either one of those with just keystroke mistakes, that could be very costly when it comes to a BOM issue, where if you type 100 instead of 10, that gets a lot more expensive really fast. Or if you type 1 and you needed 10, that becomes a problem when you go to produce it where you don't have enough. But then routings for making sure that it processes through the facility correctly. And then the last point is more on the change order process where we have items already created in Sightline CSI, and we now need to make changes because of like life cycle changes, or maybe the product isn't available anymore for that product offering that we have. Fastener grades need to change, things like that, where we need to get that information reflected in CSI. So when future shop orders going forward are using the correct information, the updates that are required, whether that was an ECR that was brought up on the shop floor because fit didn't work right, or if it's just a part that was used in that assembly is now obsolete and we have to replace it and rework that design to work that way.
Dylan, when you were working on getting your own integrations figured out, trying to solve this problem, how much time were you having to spend in this area? How much time are the people around you having to spend?
The biggest pain that I was trying to solve was, as a manufacturing engineer, I'd get pulled to assembly line or a machining center and find out that the information that they're working from is outdated and it wasn't the actual revision that engineering pushed through because that information didn't make it into the ERP system. So we were still making the product the old way that wasn't going to have the correct fit when we would go to assemble it together. And so that was the biggest pain that I was trying to solve, to be sure that we had that workflow flowing all the way through. So from when engineering says this change order is complete, that handoff just wasn't happening effectively to the downstream functions that needed the ERP to be updated, whether that was supply chain or manufacturing, to be sure that jobs and purchase orders got updated to reflect those changes, so that when it was time to produce that good, it was going to be produced in the correct way.
So really what we're about to launch into is this integration maturity model, this integration journey framework. Really, it's so much about being able to utilize all of the great functionalities of Infor CSI, of whatever insert your ERP of choice here. For us, it's Cloud Suite because it's been a great product for us. But it's about being able to utilize that functionality. Your data is only as good as what you're entering.
Yep.
Am I understanding that right, Dylan?
That's correct.
So with that said, I did want to put our first poll out there for folks to begin to go ahead and answer. How are you currently transferring your design data into Cloud Suite? Or if you're working with another ERP system, how are you doing that now? If you're answering from the perspective of a partner, which I know we have some partners who are signed up from this, how are your customers currently entering that data right now? We'll let those answers come in as I'll leave the poll up for a little bit as we continue on here in our discussion and we begin to lay out this integration journey. This is kind of the what I envision the coffee cup or the poster in your middle school teacher's classroom being, for integration being a journey, not a destination. Success is not in reaching the summit, it is finding the right elevation for your business, having a clear path to climb higher when you're ready. So we're going to take on this journey now, walk you through what this looks like, because there are 6 different elevations and overlooks along the way as we go up Integration Mountain. And we'll walk through each of these. This is just a very quick overview. You have base camp, which is ground level. So you're starting from the very beginning. I see a few folks have answered the poll and said they're entering their data completely manually. This is where you are. Printout, spreadsheets, heck, sticky notes, all of those sorts of very manual processes. Next level up is fog break overlook. You're using a spreadsheet. I see someone answered that they're using spreadsheets to import. There is organization, but it's ultimately organized chaos. Then you go on to connection crest, which is some very basic integration. Field mapping, essentially. Think one-to-one field mapping. It's what, as a marketer and not an everyday manufacturing engineer, I'm used to if I'm uploading a spreadsheet to send out an email template. I'm going to match up job title with job title. I'm going to match up ERP system with ERP system, and that data is just going to transfer one-to-one. That's a pretty common instance for folks even outside of manufacturing, to just have some basic field mapping. Then you get up to Intelligence Ridge, which is where you begin to see the AI-powered automation take you back, and then you go all the way up to full automation, this aspirational goal, reaching the summit. But again, reaching the summit is not for everyone. So let's walk through what each of these look like. And Dylan, we'll have you kind of walk in as we go through this. I see some few folks are still answering that poll there. So I'll leave that up for just a moment while we continue to walk through. So looking at, in fact, I'll go ahead and close it out. We'll have another poll coming up here very soon. Make sure everyone can see the slides we're going to walk through here. So for base camp, it's the manual process struggle. We have our favorite engineer at CADTALK. His name is Frank. He's a manufacturing engineer and conveniently also our CADTALK mascot. He is taking this journey up Integration Mountain, but right now he is stuck at base camp. So he's spending all of this time on data entry, all the things we talked about. 33% of his time on data entry, 30% of the time he's working for old data. It might take him 5 days for changes to go from an engineering change down to the shop floor. So I know a few folks entered this in the poll and said, this is where you are. This is base camp. This is the manual process. Dylan, what do you typically see of companies who come in? Again, this is aside here. We're not here to do this to pitch CADTALK specifically to you. This is a layout that we have found, a framework that we have found as we've done integrations, that is a good way to think about this, and for you to make that decision and be able to say, okay, is this something that would benefit and help us move forward? How do we assess where we are? How do we understand what would help? So Dylan, though, I will say, draw on your CAD-TALK experience here of companies that you've worked with who have come in. Do you feel like most of them are coming from a purely manual data entry perspective? Do they have something in place already? What's typically the breakdown that you see?
Yeah, so I would say, from the 100+ integrations that I've done at my time here at CADTalk, I would say probably 65% of our customers are coming from a complete manual background. Part of that is due to a lot of our sales are sold with the purchase of the ERP, but then some of them are just people frustrated with having to manually enter that. And so they seek us out and purchase us. And then probably 25% are in that some kind of intermediary automated process where they have some spreadsheet workflows and things like that for the more basic data. And they're just looking to improve that. And then there's probably 10% of our customers come to us, from using competitors' products as well.
What are the consistent things that you see when people are entering data manually? What are the, other than the pain points, what do you feel like are the ways in which people are trying to find the workaround to make this work for their company?
Well, it sucks I mean, that's the number one thing. No one wants to sit there and stare and compare between two screens and then find it there, copy and paste, or just manually hammer away on the keyboard to create something that they've already created somewhere else.
I'll be sure to work it sucks into our next PowerPoint. It's true. It is. It's no one,
Yeah.
you're right. No one wants to sit there and do manual entry. I don't want to do it. And again, I'm not entering bombs on a regular basis. I'm working in marketing, and so this is a very different world, but no one wants to do
You just
manual
deal
data
with
entry.
fancy colors and stuff.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Color palettes, all those kinds of things,
Yeah,
those
sure.
fun things.
Whatever you guys do.
um, Moving on to the next, so this is where those spreadsheets come in, and maybe you have some sort of framework to try to organize all of these changes that you're looking to make. So maybe it's manually updating a spreadsheet, importing that spreadsheet into Cloud Suite Industrial, or insert ERP of your choice. But there's also, Dylan, right, not really a path to improve that.
Yeah, with the generic spreadsheet import functionality that you get with all the ERPs, there is only so much that you're going to be able to leverage from that. You can get really cute with a bunch of macros and stuff in Excel and all of that, but at that point, by the time you get everything refined to the way it needs to be, you're going to have a lot of time in developing that. And then as ERPs upgrade and stuff, there's going to be things that'll have to change to your process on just the way the calls will need to function to be able to get that information absorbed into the ERP.
I think another thing that, and it's mentioned here on the slide, is kind of that single point of failure of not having a real system in place. A lot of times it might be, to fall back on your experience as well, someone who maybe, Frank, in this case, our engineer, is the only one who understands the system that is built. He's the only one who does the import and export. And so Frank leaves, and you're now relying on his solution that maybe only he understands, or maybe Frank's out on leave, or Frank's taking vacation, and
Or he
then
leaves.
now you, exactly. And so now you're running into those issues all over again. So that's that second step up. You are attempting and trying to figure out that data entry, but spreadsheets only get you so far. So you go and maybe you look at a basic integration. So it does work. You've reached connection crest, is what we call this level, where you are beginning to see the fruits of integration. So you're seeing some part number transfer, you're seeing some basic lookups, you're seeing some single level bombs. But why does this fall short for companies sometimes, Dylan? Sometimes this works. Sometimes this is all you need. But why does this sometimes fall short?
Yeah, and we'll talk more about this later on, but the biggest issue is, if you're kind of doing more single level bombs and stuff like that and just need really basic field mappings, they can do really well for you. But if you are looking to fully leverage your ERP with making decisions around routings and, backflushing materials and, other things around multi-level bombs, on being able to have those set up correctly, so when a shop order is suggested for that particular product, that shop order doesn't have to be modified, or you don't have to go back and make all kinds of changes to the materials of that BOM for it to function correctly to flow through the shop floor as desired.
So looking at that, and I know you mentioned we'll talk about this more, we get into this idea of, this is where I feel like the journey really begins to sit, is when you get to this, it's only level 4 out of 6. There is more to this integration mountain that Frank is summiting here. But this is where a lot of companies thrive. They find it's 60% improvement of efficiency. The AI hand that is involved handles your routine transfers really well, but it also leaves room for the engineer to be able to go in and still make some decisions on more complex issues, and you're managing by exception and being able to say, all right, maybe I've got 60% of what I do automated, maybe it's even up to 70 or 80%, but I can go in and manage the exceptions. So this is where I think this is really a key point, because there is still room to grow. There is still the summit. But for a lot of companies, this is really where it makes sense to get to, even though, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, Dylan, but I think sometimes we see manufacturers come in and they say, I've got to get to the summit. Either we can never do this, it's going to take us years, or it's just too much of an upheaval of our process. We can't change that much. There's no point. Like we just need to work with what we've got and keep our process without upending something, or we'll wait until we already are making a big change. Maybe we're going from on-prem to cloud, or maybe we're switching ERP systems entirely, and then maybe we'll make that change. So how does this work? How did we arrive at this conclusion that integration is actually a journey and not a destination? And how have you seen that to be true for the folks listening to this? Like, make the case for that. Like, why is that true?
The biggest thing is when you're starting with a customer and you start hearing all of this stuff of exactly what they need and why they have to have it that way. It's working with them kind of to help them understand that they have to meet you where they currently are to understand where they really want to go. So the biggest thing is to always work with them and help them understand to not let perfect like be the enemy of good. And so like that meaning exactly what I said is like sometimes good is good enough. And there may be things that outside of the engineering control that may be better to be handled in the ERP system by others, whether that's, production planning or supply chain, that you probably don't want to have to leverage the amount of data in CAD and manage all of that to be able to make those decisions because they're not on you in the first place. But getting that to the point where, finding that sweet spot is going to give you so much more time and value back to your days that the amount of work that's going to have to be done in the ERP is very minimal at that point from what you're currently used to.
When you're getting to this point, 60% efficiency, like enough to be able to see, as you pointed out, a marked difference in your process. What's typical timeline like for, call it ROI, call it measurable improvement? What is typical timeline like that you see?
Yeah, for our implementation process, we have a very robust process that we have crafted over the years and follow it very strictly, always, refining it because we're all manufacturing people that work here and are in this position. And so we have that problem. But, it really depends on resource availability on the customer side, but it's anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks on like how available they are to meet and continue testing with us. But, as soon as 6 weeks, you can be to that sweet spot.
So it can be not a years long process, but we're looking at less than 2 months potentially in the right scenario.
Right, and the biggest thing is, we're an off-the-shelf configurable product, so we already have everything built for the CAD side and everything built for the CSI side. So we just have to meet with you to review your CAD standards, understand what your needs are, and then configure the product for you to do that.
So there is the option and the ability when you're working with a configurable platform to go bigger. So there is, I'll run through these two pretty quickly, and I'll give you an example that you can view on our website of a company that has done this, that has really reached this, what I would call integration summit. So you have automation area here, which is beginning to go beyond that 60%. It's looking at 80% automation efficiency. You're getting into cross-department workflows. You're getting into some predictive analytics. You're really beginning to test the boundaries of what you could see from your integration. And then you can actually get to that integration summit, which is where there's almost no manual intervention. You are going from design to shop floor almost directly. And a great example of this is actually an Infor customer of ours named PBC Linear. They produce bearings and other products, and they actually had a vision about 20 years ago of being able to have someone design their product on their website through an interface, and then have that directly go to a job packet that prints on the shop floor. And with Infor, with CADTALK, with their tech stack, they've achieved that, and they're seeing the ability to update 15,000 SKUs in 24 hours. They're seeing the ability, it's saving them up to 7 figures. I mean, it's the kind of thing where it almost doesn't seem possible, but it really is when those processes are refined. So that option, I want to, most folks find, and most manufacturers find, that the 60%, give or take, efficiency improvement is certainly enough to consider the investment in an intelligent integration type platform, but the ceiling is quite high moving from that. So this is essentially, I'm almost re-asking the same poll here. I'm gonna go ahead and launch it again, because I hope that this framework, this journey up integration mountain, if you will, is making some sense. I hope it is. If it is not, please let me know. But based on what you've heard in this, where would you place your organization on integration mountain? So we kind of did that poll. It's kind of the same poll. The poll in advance of, hey, where do you think you are? And then based on what you've heard now with this integration mountain framework, where would you put your organization? Are you at base camp, where you're fully manually entering data? Are you at fog break overlook? You're doing the spreadsheet entry. Are you at connection crest? You've got a basic integration. Or are you at that point where you're like, we're at intelligence ridge or higher? We'll leave that open here and let folks answer that for just a moment. And then we will go into some more specifics around Cloud Suite Industrial specifically. So I'll let folks do that here for just a moment. Yeah, watching the results come in now, we're seeing a few folks who have that basic integration. We're seeing a few folks who are at fog break overlook, at base camp. We'll go ahead and close the poll out. Thank you for those of you who were able to respond there. I'll go ahead and pop those results out so everyone can see what we had coming in here. All right, I'll go ahead and close that out so we can keep moving forward and look at specifically the Infor Cloud Suite Industrial opportunity. So kind of getting back to this question I asked earlier, if the ERP does so much with data, which ERPs are evolving and continuing to bring in so many more capabilities natively, why can't I just use what's native to solve my problem? Would be a very valid question for someone to ask who has spent a lot of money on an ERP and who uses this ERP. And with Cloud Suite Industrial, it's saying, well, why can't this just solve my problem? What would your answer be to that question? We've alluded to it a little bit already, but what would your answer be to that question?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is ERPs they're hungry monsters and they need to be fed. So without having that adequate data being populated, whether it's on the items, current materials, so on, routings, all of that, it's only going to function as good as the inputs that you give it. So using an integration that can make decisions around business processes from data from CAD, we're able to refine that information and further apply the settings that are needed to effectively run MRP in a more robust fashion.
And as you see here from Guide Technologies, I mean, Cloud Suite is bringing together a lot of data from a lot of different areas. And really, I mean, basically what I'm hearing you say is this is essentially more efficient and more effective data points that CSI can use. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yep.
So moving forward from that, you know, let's keep going with our discussion here and talk a little bit. This is kind of a direct mirror of the slide earlier where you saw the issues that folks typically run into when they're looking at this integration. So let's go beyond the basic field mapping that I know a few folks seems like have in place currently. What's the difference in going beyond that basic field mapping versus, you know, intelligent integration, what we're calling it here?
Yeah, so basic field mapping is going to be more one-to-one. So we have a description in CAD, that's going to be our description in Sightline or CSI, sorry. But using like the intelligent integration, you know, we can create rules based around the business processes. So we can have those conversations to understand what the business processes are, what the data from CAD is, and we can, you know, supply what specific planner code needs to be and so on. All of those different types of settings on an item in Sightline that are going to help with the processing of the information to make it more aligned with what the business needs to process things effectively.
And it is important to differentiate between those engineering specific data, production relevant data, making sure you segment those things effectively as you go through. Walk us through a real world scenario though here, Dylan. So an engineer creates a new assembly, call it SolidWorks, call it Inventor, whatever your design software would be from that. Walk us through what that would look like from intelligent integration. You've got this in place and you're going over to CSI. What does that look like?
Yeah, so high level speaking, we'll just talk SolidWorks. All rules apply to any kind of 3D modeling platform that we integrate with. But you know, you have your tree of your assembly file or part file. You can have multiple configurations, so you'll finish that design, whether it's a configured part or not. When you load it through CADTALK, you'll be logged into Sightline or CSI, and if you have multiple configurations, you'll be prompted to select which configuration you want to load. You can load multiple ones at a time if they are going to be creating different SKUs and BOMs inside of CSI. The way that would work is CADTALK is then going to reference CSI in kind of like in a query type format to see if these items exist in CSI. And then it'll kind of run through our transformation engines. And that's that intelligent engine that we've talked about where we're able to develop rules based around the business processes that we discuss by keying different CAD properties that are available to make the decisions on how we need to fully define all of these items and then BOMs and routings. And then it'll propose it in a tree view inside of CADTALK, and you can review to validate that information and then submit it to CSI. And that would be without the fully automated workflow.
It's a walkthrough that you can see with demos of our product, in which case that you're looking for if you want to dive into that further. But I do want to not get into too much of a sales pitch and more think about what are our takeaways? What are questions that you can ask of yourself, of your integration, to be able to figure out, hey, where do we need to go? What are our next steps? How do we adjust this? So let's look at 5 questions that you can ask. So one is your engineering time analysis. How much time are your engineers spending on data entry versus engineering? That could be, you could conduct research on that for your own. You could just simply get anecdotal with it and say, here is, you know, how much of your time do you feel like you're doing this? Number 2, and you should be able to answer this one probably pretty easily, what percentage of your BOMs are complex assemblies? There's not a direct definition of what complex is, but you kind of know what's going to be more complex, what's going to be more difficult, or what are your more simple BOMs? Do you have a high percentage of complex BOMs? That may mean that basic field mapping, that may mean that the spreadsheets are going to create more errors for you than they're actually going to solve. How long does it take an engineering change to reach the shop floor? This is what you talked about earlier, Dylan, of being able potentially to be stuck with outdated information when you get to the shop floor, and that powerful ERP that you have is missing data. What about your current integration, if you have one? Does your current integration handle your business rules, or does it require a lot of workarounds? This is where the more intelligent you get with your integration, the more you build in those business rules, the more you don't have to have quite as many workarounds. You become managing by exception rather than managing all the time. And then just think about it. What would 60% time savings mean for your team's capacity? What else could your team be working on? What else would they be doing? How much more would they enjoy their jobs? How much more would they want to stay at their jobs? That's a little bit hypothetical, but It's a question that's worth being asked because it is something that, as Dylan, to quote you again, Dylan, it sucks to enter data manually. So what would 60% time savings and 60% less manual data entry mean for your team's capacity, your team's workload, your team's satisfaction? What would that mean? I think those are all important questions to consider. So looking at some things that Guide Technologies would recommend as well as you're looking at integration, as you're looking at implementing an ERP like Cloud Suite Industrial, or you're trying to make changes within that ERP. One is encouraging cross-departmental collaboration. So how can you align these different departments within your business, so engineering, planning, production, to make sure that you're going through and making those BOM structures line up with what's on your shop floor? How do you make sure that you set yourself up so that, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Dylan, before there gets to be an actual implementation of an integration solution, there might be some data cleanup or some data management that is required to help with that. Is that correct?
Yeah, there potentially could be, depending on what the desired results are, but we'll kind of get into it a little bit later on. But, always approaching it from kind of the crawl, walk, run approach where, if we're even able just to get items created with bombs and routings, just at a high level generic format, at least you're already gaining performance that way with being able to get it, at a minimum, bombs created with the correct part numbers and quantities. That could already be a huge lift for you to begin with.
And this is all about really alignment of teams here. There's involving procurement early, engaging procurement teams in design discussions, making sure that those supplier capabilities align with what you're doing with design, and then also just aligning engineering with manufacturing realities. I really like that point of ensuring that the designs are able to be brought over to the shop floor, and aligning those kind of two realities. Before we keep going and we go into our takeaways, we're kind of about to wrap up here. I know you mentioned crawl, walk, run. It's kind of the simplified version of an integration mountain. What do you mean by
Totally.
crawl, walk, run?
Understanding that integration as a journey, you can start small. And that's the power of us here at CADTALK versus some of our competitors. We're able to handle the small, just kind of one-to-one field mappings, but working with you to grow into a more robust process in the future.
Let's look at our takeaways. I think that's a great way to segue right into our takeaways, because integration maturity is a spectrum, not a binary. The question is not, are you integrated or are you not integrated? The question is, where do you need to be integrated to? How much would impact your business? What was the desired outcome? Being able to answer those questions lets you know, hey, how mature do we need to be in this integration? Doesn't have to be at the summit. Could be at Intelligence Ridge, as we lined out there. Basic integration can handle 20% of the challenge, but if you want to aspire to those 60%, 80%, even 95%, intelligent automation is going to need to be the way to get you there, as part of that. As I alluded to kind of in point 1.3, right destination depends on your complexity and goals. The summit is not for everyone. Start by honestly assessing where you are today. I hope this webinar has been helpful for that. We actually do have an assessment that I will include in the follow-up for if you still are not sure exactly where you would fall on the spectrum. It's a pretty simple layout of this same idea, and we have more content on our website that I'll share in a moment that can walk you through what this journey would look like for you. And then integration should be planned alongside your ERP strategy and not after. This gets me into a point that before we go into kind of our Q&A portion of this, if anybody has any questions, you can go ahead and pop those in, and we'll get to those here in just a moment if you have any. When's the best time to integrate, Dylan? When there are people who are in companies that are in vastly different areas. Maybe they're looking at it changing ERPs. They're looking at going from on-prem to cloud. They're not in that situation at all, and they're pretty happy with where they are with their ERP, so maybe they don't want to try integration. Is there a right time or a wrong time to integrate? What's the answer to that question?
I think the best time would be, if you're doing a lot of manual data entry currently from engineering into your ERP, and you have at a minimum, part numbers, descriptions, and revisions in your CAD data, then why not get started with that and at least benefit, quickly from eliminating a lot of manual data entry and just manual mistakes that can happen along the way.
So in other words, it's kind of what we want to break down is the misconception. I think there is a misconception that this has to happen when we make a big change as a business.
Yep. Yeah, which isn't true at all. I mean, that's again where I went back to kind of meeting people where they're at and like, what can we do to benefit you today?
Some resources and next steps. We do have the CAD Talk journey as we have it laid out on our website. It's got a full walkthrough, full resources of everything for you. There's videos, there's a click-through walkthrough that you can go through as well. For some reason, our website didn't update. That's guidetechnologies.com for Infor CSI expertise. We thank you for Guide for supporting us here as we are laying out this process and this integration journey. They're great partners. I'm very excited to have them be able to work with them in our partnership. If you're also just trying to figure out, hey, what does this look like for our business? Are we a candidate for looking at intelligent integration? Would our product, would CADTalk potentially be a fit? Would another product potentially be a fit? We'd be happy to walk you through what a discovery session would look like with CADTalk. You can go to our website. It's just cadtalk.com/demo to be able to look at that. I will be sure to share contact from Guide. You can contact Lori or Frank. Their contact information is here. If you look in the resources tab of the webinar portal that you're in here, there is a link to the full presentation, so you can do that as well. I'll also send out this information as part of the follow-up from the webinar here as well. Anything that we have mentioned, I'll make sure is part of the follow-up as we go forward. So thank you so much for taking time to join us today. I hope the webinar has been helpful for you. I do want to open up the time here if anyone has any questions or thoughts to be able to put into the chat or the comment box before we wrap things up here. We've got plenty of time before we close out. So if anyone has any questions, we'd be happy to answer them, or we'd be happy to take that offline if you have any questions to follow up with us about. Give it another minute to see if any questions to come in. I will wish everyone, I hope you're staying warm wherever you may be listening to if you're in the United States. Dylan, you said you were negative 45 degrees at some point in the Minneapolis area recently?
On Friday, yeah.
On Friday.
Wind chill.
Wind chill, excuse me, I'm sorry, big difference. That still is a number that feels impossible to fathom to me. I'm based out of Cincinnati, Ohio, and we are getting into the negatives around, and we still have 10 inches of snow on the ground. But no negative 45 wind chills. That doesn't compute in my brain. Question coming in from too cold to snow, exactly. A question coming in from Aaron. He says, could you please add more detail about the intelligent routings feature? Could you walk in more detail, Dylan, of what that looks like specifically?
Yeah, so basically from interrogating the model with CADTalk to understand like what type of component it is, we can make decisions. Through that, we need to meet and understand kind of what your shop floor capabilities are. But let's just, say we see it's a sheet metal part and you have laser and brake operation. And if we can see that it's a sheet metal part, we're going to send it to your laser. And if it's a formed part, then we'll also send it to the brake. So we can make decisions around that. If you have like a perimeter of the part, we can understand like what that length is that the laser needs to go and understand your speeds and feeds to calculate what the duration of that operation needs to be.
Perfect. Thank you, Dylan. Any other questions coming in? Glad I helped answer your question there, Aaron. Anything else? All right, thank you all for joining us for today's webinar. If you are ready to start that climb with integration mountain, reach out to us or folks at Guide. I'd be happy to help you along that journey. Hope this has been informative. We will send out follow-up here. We'll also send out a webinar survey as well. Just a few basic questions about the webinar. If you take the time to answer those, we'd really appreciate that, just so we can make these sessions more valuable in the future going forward. Dylan, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you as always, and looking forward to talking to you all again very soon.
Yeah, thank you all. Thanks, John.